Heidi, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I've changed into clean pajamas. I've washed my hair. I'm
We,
still not wearing a bra.
well, who needs that? You can only see you from here up anyway, so
I
it's
don't
all
think I've had a bra on since like the 20th of December. It's been lovely.
let them run free. It's nice
Yeah,
and it's like that.
yeah. Get and breathe.
Oh, Heidi, we're doing a series, this podcast, and it's called Are You the Perfect Parent? And we're talking to a range of people just to see and talk about parenting because we have this kind of very idealistic view of being a perfect parent. And the first question that I kick off with for everybody coming onto the podcast and having a chat with me is, Heidi, are you the perfect parent?
Absolutely. No, no. And I don't think there's any such thing. I really genuinely don't. I think the definition, like, I have this vision of like that kind of like Instagram perfect Stepford wives kind of thing when people say perfect parent. Like, you know me. Like, I've just admitted to not having a bra on for almost 3 weeks. I
Yeah.
don't meet those levels of social expectation. But I do think that, and I would wish this for other parents, that I can confidently say that I am a good parent to my child.
Mm,
Um, I'm not sure I would be a great parent to other people's children.
yeah.
But it's one of the things I can confidently say. I'm a good mum
Do you
for
think you've
him and what.
always felt that, Heidi, or has that kind of developed for you, that
No, I
confidence?
haven't always felt that. Although I do feel kind of I have an element of privilege with it because my mum was an amazing parent, in
Okay.
my opinion,
Yeah.
i.e., she was a good parent to me.
Yeah.
And so I think I had that modeled really well. But also as an adult, you start to see things a little differently, don't you? And you
Yeah.
unpick some of that pedal stooling, yeah, that you've got for your parent. You start to
Yeah.
realize that actually there was quite a lot more going on than you realized, and maybe they weren't getting it right all the time. But I think she did a great job. So because I was parented, I think well, or mothered well, I think I kind of learned some of those skills about good mothering, if that
Yeah.
makes sense,
Yeah,
in terms of what
absolutely.
I consider that to look like. But I definitely didn't always feel that, especially when Theo was younger. Like one of the things that was like my big thing was I broke up with, well, my marriage failed when Theo was under 2 years old.
Young.
Um, and that always felt like and that was Theo's dad. And that always felt like a big failure on my part. Like I was like, well, straight off the bat, good parents are parents that are together.
Yeah.
So I had to unpick a lot of that, and there's also a lot of social scripting around single mums are not great mums.
Yeah.
So
I hear that one.
yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, I didn't always feel that. I didn't always feel confident. And actually, to be fair, I think that really kicked in when we started having significant challenges, and I really had to step in and start advocating for him.
Okay.
Really had to learn loads about him and his neurodivergence and what he needed,
Mm.
and really be discerning and pick through all of the noise online about what you should do when you've got a child who doesn't go to school.
Yeah.
So I think being confidently able to say I'm a good mum has really only come in the last 5 years or so. And he's 20 now. So
Yeah.
I was late to the party on the whole, giving myself an easier time
Yeah.
thing.
Do you think you were late to the party though? Or do you think actually as parents we're all like that? And I wonder whether it's something about the confidence comes as we get older. Um, and especially as possibly if we've got kids with additional needs of some sort. I think we always, as parents, probably question ourselves a lot and give ourselves a really hard time a lot of the time. But actually, when our kids do things differently and our family seems to be doing it differently, I wonder whether lots of parents become late to the party with that confidence.
Yeah. And also, I do wonder, I mean, I don't know what it's like to live in a neurotypical
Yeah.
household. And I try to avoid those households as much as possible because they're definitely not my safe places. Um, and that's not to bash holistic people, but I think probably 99.9% of our friends are neurodivergent.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know what it's like to not have those feelings and to not feel like you're swimming against the tide. But I think one of the gifts of being in a neurodivergent household is that by definition, when you realize your family is different and does things differently and has to do things differently, you have to look at what your child's needs are and how you meet those needs. I'd argue more than families who don't have children with additional
Mm,
needs.
mm,
Um, because there's sort of this like social blueprint, isn't there, for raising children?
yeah.
And that doesn't work for lots of kids who are neurodivergent.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a level, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn if I say there's a level of, for lots of us, there's a level of self-awareness
Yeah.
that perhaps only comes when you've got a child with support needs
Mm, mm,
by requirement. You
yeah.
know, like you've either got to learn what they need and find a way to meet those needs, or the wheels come off. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
which
I'm
is
glad
not to
with
say that
that.
all kids aren't difficult, like inverted commas, because it's difficult being a parent. It's hard being a parent.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not saying that other people have it easy, but I think that that's a very particular and different way of parenting that
Yeah.
only people who have children with additional needs understand.
Yeah. And there's a lot of noise out there around parenting, isn't there? There's a lot of, this is the way to do it, and this ideal parenting. And if you just need to be a bit stricter, you just need to be a bit more this, a bit more that. And there's all this noise about what we should be doing. And I know I felt that really strongly with my son when he kind of crashed out of school with a big mental health break. And all this stuff about what I should be doing as a parent. And I just was beating myself up that I was this rubbish parent and that was why he was like he was. I needed to be stricter or, and there's a lot of noise out there around that.
Huge amount of noise around that, lots of misconceptions, a significant lack of training within the education sector and the health sector, and as I'm learning just recently, the social care sector around neurodivergence. But also, I think one of the biggest things that I wasn't aware of, actually, I wasn't even aware of it being an actual thing. I'd experienced it, but I didn't realize it was actually, it had been researched and peer reviewed until I was writing my book. But there's proven bias within systems, social, education, and health around parental blame of neurodivergent children.
Yeah.
So there's proven research that shows that when you have a child who is neurodivergent and is doing life differently, that professionals, without intending to, have
Mm,
inbuilt bias based on the systems they're working within, which points the finger at you. It's not that your child has needs, it's that you're a rubbish parent.
yeah.
And so many of us encounter that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to believe that you're a good parent when you're under the cloche of that, right? It's hard
Absolutely.
to tell yourself it's okay, you can trust yourself, trust your gut, you're doing the right thing, you know what's right for your kid. They're letting you know what they need, and you just need to meet those needs.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
when you've got people whose job it is to understand these things, saying you just need to do
Yeah.
insert whatever, be more strict, set more boundaries,
Take things
bring
away.
them into school in their pajamas.
Yeah.
um, so it's really hard to bolster yourself and it hammers your self-esteem.
Mm, it does.
And the amount of self-doubt that you experience when, and like the first time you say to a parent, I naively thought I would say to a professional, he's really struggling to come into school, and they would be like, oh, okay, well, we've dealt with this before. Let's find a way to support you.
Mm,
That's not what I got. I got, all kids hate school, get him in.
yeah.
That's your job. It's the law.
Yeah. And then they frighten you. Then that's what I felt was that I became very frightened by I had to do these things or I was going to be in trouble. And I have this big issue about being in trouble anyway, but that's a whole other
Same.
podcast probably. That I then became really frightened that I was going to prison. I was worried I was going to prison and I was going to be fined. I didn't have enough money, a single parent, and how was I going to manage? And I had to get him into school. And
Yeah,
I didn't have the confidence, even with the background that I've got and the work that I've done, to say no. And I waited way too long. And if I could go
same.
back, shoulda, coulda, woulda, um, I would change things. So I waited way too long.
Yeah. There are some things though, I think a lot of us have that guilt of, I wish, you know, if I, but you don't know what you don't know.
No.
And I have lots of conversations with parents in my community about this. And there are some things you can only learn by experience.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of them.
Yeah.
You can definitely gather support around yourself. You can definitely make it, inverted commas, easier for yourself. But ultimately, until you've walked this walk,
Yeah.
you can't understand it and you can't know how you're going to feel. And you don't know how triggered your trauma responses and your
Mm-mm.
central nervous system and your, for example, fear of
Mm-mm.
being told off is going to be. Because, like one of the things that I'm really keen for people to understand is that generally speaking, neurodivergent kids have neurodivergent parents, whether we know it or not.
Mhm.
And so when you are someone who is trying to advocate, for example, for your child who has barriers to attendance, and you're going into meetings in classrooms, and when your school experience was peppered with trying to fit in, trying to mask, trying to pretend you understood, trying not to get in trouble, being terrified of getting in trouble, all of
Yeah.
that all comes flooding in. Like when I sat in a headmaster's office when I was
Mhm.
like 44, I've been so nervous in my life.
Mm.
I'd never been in the headmaster's office when I was in school because I was so
Yeah.
terrified of getting into trouble. I made sure I never did,
Yeah. Yeah, I know
you
exactly
know?
what you mean.
So, like, to be sat across the table from a
Yeah.
principal of a high school being told, you have a legal responsibility to get your child to school. You are breaking the law. You are at risk of fines and prosecution. My God, I was terrified.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard, that, isn't it? I think, like you say, I'm similar, and I got those kind of feelings going back into school. I didn't like school. I didn't find it a nice place to be. It was very stressful. I was highly anxious, and going back, like you say, into meetings. But funnily enough, when I put my professional hat on, I can do it.
Yeah,
But put me as a parent, and I just thought, I can't do this. And
yeah,
suddenly my voice was gone. It didn't mean anything. Whereas I've been in previous meetings as a professional and been able to very confidently run those meetings, be part of those meetings, and be part of quite difficult meetings. But put me in there as a parent, and suddenly I just went back to being very submissive.
yeah. And that is kind of coloured by the institutionalized parental blame that we have and the uh, unwritten and unspoken bias that there is towards single mums, especially.
Mm.
So you could guarantee that even though people don't know they're doing it, you go into a meeting as a professional, you will be received differently as if you go into a meeting with the
Yeah.
same people as a parent.
Mm.
And I wish more people knew that. I wish I'd known that.
Yeah.
Because I went in there thinking, well, I know my stuff. And I crumbled in that first meeting. I sobbed. And I was really cross with myself.
Yeah. And then
Because
we
I was
beat
like,
ourselves
oh,
up, don't we?
I've
Yeah.
just given them evidence that I'm like neurotic as heck. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Yeah. And
which
people
is
might be really
awful.
surprised to hear that about you, Heidi, I suppose, because when they see you, on social media, or when you do, podcasts and things like this, people would perceive you would be very outspoken and very confident. And I think possibly, and that's part of the reason for doing the podcast is actually it's reassuring to know that none of us have got it pinned. We've all learned as we've gone along, and made changes and got better at things, but we never had it pinned.
No, never. Oh, Liz, I was an absolute wreck. I was an absolute wreck during that process. And like writing the book was part of my processing of it. It was part of
Yeah,
my recovery and my healing. But people, say to me, oh, but I'm nothing like you. Like I don't have your confidence. And like I have to remind people, look, I didn't know I was neurodivergent until I was 45.
yeah.
Like I have the benefit, inverted commas, of having masked for 90% of my adult life. You know,
Mhm.
like don't be fooled by, there's a reason that I wrote the book and there's a reason that I have a chronic health condition. And that's because I'm not the balls to the wall,
Yeah,
take no shit individual that everyone might think that I appear to be.
yeah,
I can be
yeah, yeah,
when
yeah,
required, but that is part of my mask.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, ultimately, I don't think there's a single human on earth who, when faced with the worry, the trauma, the just overwhelm of being in a situation where your family is in crisis, is going to not be affected by that. And
mm.
is not, and like, yes, you can turn it on for a 45-minute meeting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or for a podcast recording or,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
every single one of us,
Hmm.
parents who have been through this, have lain in bed, breaking their heart, sobbing,
Yeah.
and have thought, I just want the world to swallow me up. I don't want to do this. I
Mm,
can't
mm,
handle
mm,
this. This is too
mm.
much. This is killing me,
Yeah. And it's really interesting because you just touched then on about, kind of chronic health conditions as well. And that was another thing I kind of wanted to chat to you around was around, you know, the chronic health conditions and how that has impacted your parenting. And I've got a bit of a theory, Heidi, and I'm not a research person. I wish I was, and I was all kind of academic-y, and I'm just not.
We can
Probably
pretend.
it's a dyslexic brain in the background that just thinks, no. Um, that I have this theory that I would just love to know from parents after they have been through the stress and trauma of the education system with the kids with additional needs, neurodivergent kids, is how many of them afterwards are diagnosed with chronic health conditions. I, for one, have been diagnosed since. I think there was probably something always in the background, but I think probably related to stress and anxiety as well.
Yeah.
And then this was a big, major kind of stressor in our life. And since then, I've then also been diagnosed with some autoimmune conditions and stuff like that. And I know that that's something that you experience too. And I
Mhm.
just wondered how that has impacted your parenting, because I know it's impacted mine.
Yeah. I mean, I feel fortunate that I've got an older child.
Yeah,
I, it's really the way it worked for us. Like, I wouldn't have picked it, but this is how it went. He hit crisis. He needed me 24/7 for
mhm,
about 3 years, um, for everything. Um, and I don't talk too much, like in detail about what happened, but he was very unwell. And I had to drop everything and prioritize him to keep him safe and to keep him well.
yeah,
And then we managed to get him some support. I went to tribunal twice. That on its own is enough to push you over the edge.
yeah,
I went to tribunal twice. We managed to get him an educational awareness at school package, and I fought really hard, and I got him a really good package of support that included occupational therapy, which was an absolute freaking lifesaver, but also psychotherapy. We had, some physical, like practical physiotherapy. So he had climbing lessons to help
yeah,
develop his physical skills and his
yeah,
strength and core strength and that, because he's since been diagnosed with EDS as well. So all of that was in the mix.
yeah.
Um,
And for those that don't know, EDS is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's a connective tissue disorder,
yeah.
which basically means that you have very loose, well, in his case, very loose and unstable joints.
I've got that diagnosis too.
Yeah, and it affects his balance
Yeah.
and
And
all
can
that,
be
all
really
that fun
common, can't it,
stuff.
in neurodivergent people?
Yeah, really common co-occurrence.
Mm.
So the climbing really helped with that, and he was going to Pilates. Like, we really threw everything at it,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
As he started to recover, we also had a PA, a mentor who came for 10 hours a week.
Mhm.
As he started to recover and that kicked in, I think what happened, without being too woo about it, is that I went, whew, and then all of that I'd been sat on just hit me like a train. So he was then beginning to be able to go out and engage in stuff in the community. He had a mentor here for 10 hours a week. We had a package that was about 35 hours a week where other people were with him during that time. And I took to my bed.
Yeah.
And that was it. I was in bed. Uh, his package started in the September. I was in bed from the middle of October until just before Christmas,
Wow.
like permanently.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and then I've steadily recovered. Um, Found things that work for me, but the hangover of that is my mobility is significantly impacted. I have a
Yeah.
chronic fatigue condition, and I now am an ambulatory wheelchair user. So I use a wheelchair when I'm out and about in
Yeah.
public, usually. Not always, but I do particularly enjoy standing up from a wheelchair and shouting, "It's a miracle." It's one of my favorite things. Uh, I'll never get tired of it. Um, but so I know lots of parents who have had a similar trajectory, who
Mm.
have. I listened to a really interesting podcast last night. I don't know if you've listened to the You Can Do Hard Things podcast, but it's incredible.
No.
And I listened to an episode last night about boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of boundaries. But what they were talking about was personal boundaries, boundaries that you set for yourself to keep yourself safe and
Yeah.
well. When you are a parent who is going through that kind of crisis, you are so far down the list, you're not even on the list. You're in survival. And
Yeah.
like, I know we say to parents all the time, oh, self-care is important. Put your own gas mask on first. There are no gas masks.
You're just getting through, aren't you?
You're
From literally
just
lurching from one
surviving.
day to the
Like
next.
you're literally treading water
Yeah.
and trying to keep them out of the water. That's the
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
And it's extended. Like for us, it was almost 4 years. For lots of families, that's actually not very long.
Yeah.
If you're early on in an education career with a child and you're in preschool, it can take years
Yeah.
to get everything identified in terms of what their needs are because they're also growing and progressing and things are changing and milestones are coming and they're not hitting them or they're hitting them differently or all of that. But the thing in this podcast was saying, when we're not able to set those boundaries to keep ourselves safe around things like basic stuff like, am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating well? Am I all that fun stuff that is like basic keep yourself alive stuff,
Hmm.
then that has an impact on our health, understandably. And I think that's what happens to lots of family, lots of parents.
Yeah.
We are genuinely not able to prioritize anything other than keeping our children alive.
Yeah.
And we are genuinely not able to think about anything other than surviving.
Yeah.
And when that continues for an extended period, at some point, your body responds. And I think that that's what we've got. And this is what I wish the powers that be understood. This is not just about difficult, objectionable children refusing to go to school. The impact of a child not being in school ripples throughout the whole family,
That's
to
huge.
extended family,
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
friends,
Yeah.
to grandparents, to neighbours,
Yeah.
you know, and you have a child in the centre of it who might be, hopefully, getting some support, but all the people around that child who are experiencing trauma,
Mm.
at the end of it, they've got to process that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and even with great therapy and good self-care, this is a life-altering experience.
It certainly
And
is.
I don't believe that anyone comes out unscathed.
Mm.
I just don't believe it.
Yeah.
You can't have that level of emotional upset
Yeah.
and the pressure that you are under,
Yeah.
even without school uh, attendance difficulties, even without that, just having a child who has different needs to the majority, that is a life-altering experience. You know, for good and for bad. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not one of, but also I don't think we should shy away from saying this is really bloody hard.
Yeah.
You know, like I adore my son, and our relationship is hands down the most precious thing in my life, right?
Yeah.
And I know we would not have the relationship that we have if we had not been through the things that we've been through. And thank God he is out the other side of the worst of this phase of his life. Who knows what's coming in the future? But he has recovered and he is like my little poster boy for if you get
Yeah.
it right, it's possible. All things are possible.
Yeah.
And he's worked incredibly hard. And I would not have that any other way. And it was awful. So two things can be true, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a it's nothing, I think you can't even explain it to people, can you? I know I sometimes try and explain it to people or friends or family that aren't in it, and I never feel like I can really give it justice about quite how difficult this is. And there are times when you are literally trying to keep your child alive, and that's your only job. The basic job of being your parent, you think, I've got to keep this kid alive.
Yeah,
Um, and that is the most terrifying feeling as a parent
yeah,
when you know that that's coming from external sources. That's not something you can't change it immediately. And that was horrible. That was the
yeah.
worst feeling for me.
And, for families, I'm a single parent to a lone child, so we don't have siblings or anything. But for
Mm.
families who have siblings, you've also got to parent your other children.
Mhm.
If you've got a partner, you're trying to maintain a relationship with your partner.
Yeah.
You're trying to keep your family afloat. you know, and yourself,
Mm.
like the pressure, like for lots of families in my community, they might have children who, have other conditions as well as their neurodivergence, or, really common is lots of the young people in our community have OCD. That's an incredibly difficult thing to handle. And it, I think there's this kind of misconception that when you've got a child who is in mental health crisis, that and this does happen, but that they're just in bed all day. And that is like, it's almost like, well, that must be easy. You just take them 3 meals a day. And they're like, what do you mean you're trying to keep them alive? Some of our children, young people, are not in bed all day. They are throwing themselves off walls and at other people in the household. And they are, their trauma response is an attack response. And that
Yeah.
is not their fault. And it's also not the fault of the people who they're living with. And it's incredibly difficult as a parent when you have a child whose trauma response is, that kind of like aggression or attack, and that's even harder to explain to other people.
Yeah.
Like there's kind of thing where if their presentation is kind of like shut down
Yeah.
and docility and, like inverted commas, classic depression, they're not getting out of bed, let's
Mm,
say.
mm, mm,
That is sort of an easier explanation for
mm.
people to grasp. If you just say they're just so unwell, they can't get out of bed. Like people don't understand disability, but that is something that people can begin to understand. You can sort of say,
Yeah.
imagine they've got really bad flu, they feel like that all the time.
Yeah.
But some people, and I'm glad people can't understand this, but some people cannot understand how it feels for a person to be in such distress that that distress spills out and comes out as aggression towards other people, people who they love.
Mm.
And people cannot understand how that
Yeah.
works. And so you're doubly isolated. And also, you don't want to tell people about that because of the judgment that comes with that.
There's a lot of shame, isn't there,
You as a
around that?
parent, and also, you don't want people to think badly of your child.
No.
You don't want to tell them that they said this awful thing to you, because you didn't want to hear it and you don't want to repeat it.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think it is just impossible for people to understand
Mm.
unless they've experienced. And that's why it's so important that we have communities of parents to support each other who do get it. And every family is different and every child is different, but we do have that kind of common terms of reference, and we don't have to do the lead up to the whole. We don't have to explain. We don't have to go through the whole chronology of how it happened. We can just say, oh, I've got a child with barriers to attendance. And other parents are like, yeah, get it. Okay, what's going on? Do you
And
know what
I
I mean?
found as well, there was this when I talk to other people, other parents that get it, there's not a need to fix me and there's not a need to fix my family. There's just an acceptance of, like you say, yeah, get it.
Yeah,
Been there. I'm down there with you. I totally understand, get it.
yeah,
But there's not a need to make it better. Whereas, sometimes like you get that, you just need to, it's one thing
yeah.
that drives me
Have you
mad.
tried?
You just need to do this. Yeah, have you tried this? No.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'll pop that on my list with, oh, you've got ADHD, make a list.
Yeah.
I think that it's not even that bit is not even a parenting issue. I think that's a disability issue. I think that people are so terrified of disability. And, I'm red hot on this. I don't think that disability is a dirty word. And I wish more people would embrace it as a definition. And, the definition in the UK of disability is you have a condition, an illness, um, or a presentation that has an effect, an impact on your capacity to carry out day-to-day activities, and has lasted or will last more than 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's a very broad umbrella. But everyday activities includes being able to get up and go to school, being able to get up and wash yourself,
Yeah.
being able to get up, being
Yeah.
able to hold down a job, being able to parent, all of those things are day-to-day activities. And if you have something that is impacting your capacity to do that, for an extended period, i.e., more than 6 months, then newsflash, you're disabled. And I wish more of us would just be like, yeah, I've got a disability. Because actually, this is something I've really had to work on because obviously becoming a wheelchair user, like that is a bit easier in terms of explaining to people that I have a disability.
Yeah.
I was disabled long before I used a wheelchair. Um, but also I hear from people like really like so at the minute I'm trying to adopt a dog, right?
Yeah.
And I messaged someone who was a rescue and they had a dog who has epilepsy.
Yeah.
And I messaged them and said, blah, blah, blah. I'm interested in this dog. Just want to let you know a little bit about myself. You know, here's what I am. This is why I think I might be a good fit for this dog. And I have no problem with a dog with a disability. And the response was, the dog isn't disabled, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And I was like, I thought the dog had epilepsy. Yes, but he's not disabled. Like, if we're so
Yeah.
like scared of even saying that a dog with epilepsy is disabled,
Yeah. Yeah.
what does that tell us about
Yeah.
whether we're willing to say that humans are disabled?
Yeah.
So I wish more people would do the work or were supported to do the work around unpicking that internalized ableism.
Mm.
Because as a disabled person, you do have protection in law. And for me, understanding that for myself and for my young person,
Yeah.
an absolute freaking game changer. That gave me the confidence in meetings when I was going into meetings and they were saying, oh, well, he just needs to. I was like, no, he's disabled.
Yeah.
And that was like it was a good, like, we're shutting this down right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's disabled, he's protected by the Equality Act. You need to make adjustments and accommodations.
Yeah.
How are you going to support this disabled child?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of my confidence came from in terms of being able to advocate for him. And that's what I really, when I'm working with clients, I've got a client at the moment and she's autistic and ADHD. And we've done a lot of like me saying, you're going to have to get used to saying to people, I'm disabled and need accommodations. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you need.
It's
You
funny,
know?
isn't it, that we have that reaction to that word, that like you say, it's a bit of a dirty word and people don't want to use it. And I know a couple of times I've used it around my son, and he's been really quick to say to me, I'm not disabled.
Yeah.
And we're having conversations around that, and he's having a lot of transition into understanding what it is to be autistic, and that's we're still with him a couple of years down the line, and he still struggles with that.
Yeah.
Um, Hates the word superpowers. If someone says superpowers to him, he's gonna probably,
Same.
yeah, hates that one. Um, he got asked once, I think, by some, but a very well-meaning professional, and they often are well-meaning, what his superpowers was because he was a superhero, and he said to them, "I'd rather be a supervillain because they have more fun, apparently."
Ah, I love that. I mean, yeah. I mean, if I'm a superhero, where's my freaking cape and where's my X-ray vision? That's
And
what
it
I would.
takes away the fact that it's really hard. And he
Right.
kept saying this doesn't feel good. If I had a choice at the moment where he is, he
Yeah.
feels he wouldn't be autistic.
And we don't ask autistic people what their superpower is. That would be a
No.
weird thing to ask any other child.
Yeah.
What's your superpower? Don't be daft.
Yeah. It's just,
Like yeah. I think the thing with disability, and I think it's really important to say, like, this has been something that I've been unpicking for a good while, and I'm
yeah.
still working on it,
Yeah.
right? It's only in the last 6 months that I've really been like, we're taking the wheelchair,
Yeah.
and I've used a wheelchair on and off for 4 years. Um, so, and that's one part of my disability, but it's a big piece of work because, well, this is my theory that disability is terrifying to people
Mm.
because it's something that can happen to anybody and it is an indication that you're closer to death.
Okay. Yeah.
So, um, and that might not be true, but that is how it's perceived, right?
Yeah.
Disabled people are perceived as not living as long
Yeah.
or as good a life,
Yeah.
inverted commas. There's a lot of quality of life stuff around
Mm-hmm.
the whole disability conversation, right? And but what I think we miss is that disability is the only protected characteristic that you can acquire literally overnight. You could
Yeah.
wake up tomorrow morning and be disabled,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like, whether that's a physical incapacity or a mental incapacity. You could, I mean, the physical bit is a bit easier for people to get their head around, but you could walk out in the street tomorrow, get hit by a bus,
Yeah.
and acquire significant injuries that meant that you became a wheelchair user.
Mm.
And that is literally the luck of the draw. And As you get older, your chance of becoming disabled, whether it's a physical impairment or mental impairment, significantly increases. Most people, by the time they die, have a disability of some description.
Mm-mm.
If you've had a heart attack, if you've had a stroke, if you've got Alzheimer's, all of these things that come with old age are disabilities. So we're terrified of it because it is an indication that we're not immortal
Mm.
and we're terrified of death. That's my theory.
Mm-mm.
I'm not a researcher, um, but take aside the whole people thinking that disabled people are inferior. I think ultimately it's frightening for people to
Yeah.
consider.
And I wonder whether there's something in there about saying that you're disabled as well that gives a person a sense of they're giving up, that I'm going to get worse. If I say I'm disabled and I accept it, and
Yep.
there's something I think about, even for myself, that I'm one of those boom and bust, and I will fight and fight and fight and fight, and then I crash, and I'm trying to work on that and make that better.
Same.
But there is a feeling in me that I don't want to give up. And to say that you are disabled by something, is that sense, are you saying you're giving up? And I suppose I wonder whether that's what could be in people's heads. Is that,
Yeah. And I think if you're not someone who is affected by a life-limiting condition,
yeah,
and you don't understand that you have no control. The whole point of a life-limiting
yeah,
condition is that it's not something you can just think your way out of. Don't get me wrong, good mindset, good self-care, positive thinking, all of that, meditation, helpful,
hmm
yes.
hmm
Not a cure for disability.
yeah,
Sorry to burst your bubble. Like I can work on my pacing, I can work on my my boundaries,
yeah,
personal and otherwise. I can make sure that I'm taking care of myself. I can eat well, I can sleep well, I can be in therapy, all those things.
yeah.
I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and not have a chronic fatigue condition. It
Then
might
there's an
improve.
element of acceptance, isn't there?
Right.
It's getting
And
to the
so
acceptance that
for
it's
me,
okay.
and I had a massive thing about the wheelchair for a long time. I
Mm-mm.
felt like I was cheating. I can walk, right?
Yeah,
Um, if I absolutely needed to, I could run.
yeah,
So who am I to be rolling about in a wheelchair? I felt like a fraud.
mm.
Thing is, if I go to the supermarket and don't use one of those ridiculously slow sit on buggy things that always run out of juice halfway round,
Halfway round.
normally in the pizza section, and you're like, excuse me, this has run out of battery. Nobody plugged this in. Or use my wheelchair. Then I get home, I can unpack the shopping. That's about it. I'll be in bed for
That's
14.
you done. Yeah.
So what I think what I had to work on, I don't say this is me, I had to work on using mobility aids, especially, is not because I can't do the thing. It's
Mm.
because by using those aids, it means I'll be able to do more of the things I want to do
Yeah.
because I'm conserving my energy.
And then that enables you to be more present as a parent.
Right. And just like things like the whole giving up thing, if I call myself disabled, and I do get it. And also there's an element of people are going to think I'm going to use this, right?
Yeah.
I feel the same way about diagnoses for neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
Like diagnosis is choice and a privilege, and I believe in self-ID. Equally, whether I choose to call myself disabled or not, I'm still freaking disabled.
Mm.
So why not admit it and make things a little bit easier for myself?
Mm.
Why fight the urge to use a walking stick when I know that because I sometimes get dizzy, I'm likely to fall over if I don't have something to lean on?
Yeah.
Like, I would prefer to use a walking stick than to fall flat on my face in Sainsbury's,
Yeah.
or I'd prefer to be able to go to the theatre. That's something we really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Take the wheelchair and not fall asleep halfway through the second half because I'm so exhausted,
Mm.
which has happened when
Mm.
I'll be all right. I'll just walk from the car park, you know?
Yeah.
So it's still there.
Yeah.
You still are that thing, whether you self-determine in that way or not. Like, make it easy for yourself, like easier.
Yeah.
Like the labeling, the whole thing of I would rather say to people, I've got a chronic fatigue condition and I use a wheelchair, than for them to think that I'm really freaking rude because we go out for dinner and after the starter, I feel so unwell and so tired I have to go home.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of work to do there. And don't get me wrong, I've specifically been in therapy for this for over a year. So like this is pretty much all I've talked about in my
Yeah,
therapy every week for over a year. So, and that's a privilege, you know.
yeah,
But I do feel that, I intend to live another, let's hope, 30 years,
yeah.
I don't want to be feeling crap about myself for all that time.
Mm,
If I'm incapacitated, is that the word? I think it is,
yeah,
by an illness. I want that to be because the opposite of giving up is that I'm doing everything I can to keep
yeah,
myself as well as I can,
yeah.
actually. And that includes using mobility aids.
Well, it gives you a bit of control back, is that the
Right,
illness takes away from you.
right,
So actually, by saying I've got a disability and using the aids that you need or the supports that you need, gives you back a sense of control.
right.
Yeah.
And even just like I have a blue badge, right?
Mm.
Which took me ages to apply for.
I was going to say,
I was
they're
like,
like gold dust.
right. And I got
Yeah.
it. And when I got it, and I also have PIP, which is personal independence payment.
Yeah.
When I got PIP and I got a blue badge, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually passing the test on are you disabled or not? Other people can see it for me. Why can't I see it for myself? But like the blue badge, right? Like I don't always use blue badge parking because I don't always need it. But when I need it, it's an absolute godsend. My
Yeah.
son has a lot of hospital appointments. We can park at the hospital. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know?
What?
So one thing I do think is worth is a really big thing that I've worked through in therapy actually is, and I can't remember the name of the thing, and my therapist will be like, you should credit the person who came up with that, and I can't remember, but it's not my thing. The the battle as a disabled person. So you're playing a game, right? And you get to choose which game it is. So one game is the game when you are resisting the notion that you are disabled,
Yeah.
right? So you are playing netball, for example. You're one person on one team, and your team is team of one, and the other team, how many people are on a netball court? Nine? I know.
7.
There you go, seven. They're your disability,
Yeah.
right? You're never, ever, ever gonna win
Yeah.
because you're outnumbered by your disability, right? So
Mm.
you're playing to try and not be disabled. Flip that and play to have a better quality of life,
Yeah.
right? So in that instance, the scales are tipped because you're not trying to not be disabled because you are disabled, but you're putting the effort into instead of putting the effort into I'm determined not to be disabled, you're putting the effort into I'm determined to be disabled in the best way for me.
Yeah.
And that has been a massive shift for me.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like being okay, inverted commas, with the term disability has made very little difference to my actual disability. I still have all the physical symptoms, I
Yeah.
still have all the mobility differences, but I don't give myself nearly as much of a hard time.
Mm.
And so I think part of it, I thought the giving up thing, and I also naively thought if I learn how to pace, I won't be disabled anymore. And then my therapist was like, remember, we're not playing that game.
Yeah.
We're
I like
playing
that. We're not
the
playing that game.
we're not playing the let's not be disabled game. We're playing the let's be disabled in a way
Yeah.
that works for you
Yeah. Yeah.
game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you can tell I could bang on about this all day, but I think it's
I mean,
really
if you could go back kind of to your younger self when you were younger as a parent, knowing what you know now, which is all great, isn't it, in hindsight, what would you say to yourself back then when things were really tough, maybe, or you were going through a really tricky time with things? What bit of advice would you give to yourself back then?
glad you said as a parent because I always think of that. I don't know what film it is, but or maybe it's Schitt's Creek, and she
Oh,
says,
it's
"You're young, you're beautiful. Take lots of naked pictures." That's not
yeah,
my
as a
advice for
parent.
parents. Do that too.
If you want to, on the side, maybe don't show the kids.
And one day you'll look back on that
Yeah.
little perky body and you'll be so like, oh my God. Anyway, that's not my advice for parents. My advice for parents or for myself would be, um, Well, I think that the lesson that I learned
Mm.
um is like you've got to look at your priorities
Okay. Yeah.
and you've got to decide what your non-negotiables are
Mm.
for you as a family, whatever your family looks like. And you prioritize that, and all the decisions you make are based on that. So for me, that became my child's mental health
Yeah.
and my relationship with my child.
Yeah.
They were my priority. I wish I'd added in and my health.
Yeah. Which we're rubbish at doing.
So at the time, that felt like too much of a stretch. But in hindsight, I think there are things I could have done.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that I say to people is when you're in that response where, an email comes, you've heard me say this before, Liz, an email comes on Friday afternoon because that's when caseworkers empty their inbox.
Yeah.
So an email hits at 4 o'clock Friday afternoon, you open it and you are stewing all weekend
Hmm.
because even if you reply, they won't read it until Monday. So things like I would have spent a little bit of time thinking about what my boundaries around communication with the local authority would have been.
Mm.
And I would have said, I don't open any emails on a Friday from the LA because even if I reply, it won't make any difference.
No, no.
I'll open them on a Monday morning, you know? Or when I was working on my working document, for example, like because of my autistic brain, the detail, like I was obsessive over like individual words. That's probably why I got such a good plan in the end.
Hmm.
But there are some things that I fought over, which in hindsight didn't really matter,
Yeah.
you know? Like one thing I always laugh. The first time we went to tribunal, I went to tribunal for a book. Literally,
It's,
everything else was signed off in the plan. The only thing that wasn't signed off was one particular book that was £32.99 that the local authority wouldn't approve. I went to tribunal for it.
did you get it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Was it worth it?
like debatable. It was worth it in terms of I had the experience of going to tribunal, and that then meant that I was a better advocate for other families.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But I wish I'd picked my battles more discerningly.
Yeah.
I could have spent that time and energy on something else.
Yeah.
So I think I would go back to myself and I would say, just take a step back, take a minute. If your child is cared for and inverted commas, well or recovering,
Hmm.
you're doing a great job. If your relationship with your child's intact, you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
If you're managing to wash your undercarriage on a semi-regular basis and eat 3 meals a day, you're smashing it. Everything else can wait. Like things like deadlines and timescales and, which the whole EHCP process is driven by. It doesn't matter. If you miss a deadline, it's not the end of the world. Parents don't get barred from tribunal. It doesn't happen. So, sometimes it's just like if it means that you miss a deadline by a couple of days because you just need to sit under a fluffy blanket with your kid and watch Wicked back to back for the whole weekend, then do it.
Yeah.
Do that anyway. That's excellent self-care advice, I think.
Yeah.
We've already watched it 4 times.
Have you?
But, I priorities.
Yeah.
Think about that really carefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I do wish that I had realized sooner and that well-intentioned or not, some of the advice and the information I was being given by well-meaning professionals was way off.
Yeah.
And I hear from people all the time, oh, the Senko's lovely. I'm sure she is. Doesn't mean she's giving you the right
Yeah.
information,
Yeah.
you know? And, it, intention does not reduce impact.
Mm.
Like people can have great intentions. I don't believe that there are many people in the education system who are intentionally hurting our children.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Doesn't mean that the education system is not hurting our children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, priorities and giving yourself permission to just take a bit of time out and being questioning about things.
Yeah.
Just because someone in a position of authority says it's like this, it's not the case. I've had it recently with supporting a family, and a social worker has been pushing back on requests for reasonable adjustments and, has used terms that are so outdated, used the term registered disabled, which has not been a thing since the Equality Act came in 2010,
Yeah.
even sooner, actually. Well, we need to see evidence that they're registered disabled. No, you don't. That's not how the Equality Act works. That's not how reasonable adjustments work. But if I hadn't been there to say that, that parent wouldn't have known that. And that's not me being like, I know this.
Mm-mm.
But, there are things that the Equality Act, I think, as a parent of a neurodivergent child, if you don't do anything else, you don't even have to go and read the Sen Code and practice. Go and read the Equality Act. My
Yeah.
God, it's a strong weapon to wield.
Mm.
As soon as someone hears, I think you might be in breach of the Equality Act, you better believe they'll sit up and take
Yeah.
some notice. And they usually are.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they usually are in breach of the Equality Act. They're usually discriminating based on disability and making assumptions about your child
Mm.
or not making accommodations for your child that they should be.
And having the knowledge, doesn't it, gives you that sense of a sense of control, I suppose,
Yeah.
that you actually, not that you can control other people, but gives you a sense of control back to your life.
Feeling like you've got some choices,
Yeah.
like the hardest thing in this process is feeling like you have no choices and you're on this train and it's going to the
Mm.
end of the line and there's
Mm.
a freaking TNT thing strapped to the front of it and the end
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
line is the edge of a cliff.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, just being able to think, actually, I could go up to the carriage and just pull the brake on for a bit.
Mm. Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
throw the engine driver off, an analogy and running with it. But, I just ultimately, as a parent, your job is to keep your child safe, right? That's it.
That's what I say to my boys. My boys, when I say to them, "What's my job?" And they both go, "To keep us safe." They're so bored of me saying it. But
Everything
that,
else can
yeah,
wait. And,
yeah,
and safety looks different in different households and
yes,
looks
it does.
different for different families.
Yeah,
And there comes a time when you can't protect your children,
yeah,
you know, but you can still model to them what it looks like to keep them safe. And I think one of the things that I am really encouraged by is that we have this generation of parents who will push back, who will swim against the tide, who will, you know, be that parent and make things a bit hard for people to screw our kids over.
mm,
But our kids learn from that.
yeah,
And so we have a generation of children, young people coming up now who know that it's not okay if you
mm,
feel uncomfortable in a situation, who know that if you're in a room and you feel like you want to run, it's okay to get up, excuse yourself, and leave.
yeah. You don't have
And
to
if
sit there
more
and bear
kids
it.
knew that, my God, because how many of us as
Like I
adults
say, I wish I'd
don't
known
do
that when
that for
I was a kid.
ourselves, right?
Yeah,
So there's a lot of you'll get all kinds of things wrong. You will. But I think one of the things that this process does make is self-aware children
yeah,
who have some self-advocacy skills.
yeah.
And I don't think either of those things are in any way a bad thing as an adult,
No, no,
particularly as a disabled adult.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I
yeah.
suppose I was just thinking, Heidi, I'm just kind of coming towards the end and thinking about some of the things that you offer at the moment. So there'll be parents out there that have listened to you today. Some will know you really well, some might not know you quite so well. But you offer a lot of support to parents with the offers that you have at the moment. I just wondered if you wanted to just briefly give us a bit of an outline of what it is you offer parents. And obviously, at the bottom of the show notes, we'll put all your kind of contact details and where people can find you.
Sure. So, come and follow me on social media if you just want to hear a gobshite going on about how shitty it is to be raising a neurodivergent child and just to feel like you're being seen and heard. That's free. Also, stay tuned for pictures of my new dog. But I wrote a book, which is called Your Child Is Not Broken, Parent Your Neurodivergent Child Without Losing Your Marbles. It's a Sunday Times bestseller. You can get it in all good bookshops, and it's also available on audio. And the audio book includes a section with my son Theo, which I think is absolute comedy gold. Um, I have the main thing that kind of most people are the way into me, I guess, is I have a big free Facebook group where we have like 15,000 families, all of whom are navigating the education process. And a lot of people from that group then go on to join my Marble Run. So the Marble Run is an online membership for parents and carers in neurodivergent households, particularly those who have children with barriers to attendance and who might need to look at things like an EHCP in England. So the Marble Run has like 70 hours of video trainings, resources, templates. We have a monthly Q&A. We have a fortnightly Get Shit Done session, which is a body doubling session for parents. We have a monthly session with a psychotherapist, and we have a monthly guest who come in and talk about different things that might be affecting the community. So that's something that people dip in and out of. It's 27 quid a month. And that's kind of the thing that I'm like, if I didn't do anything else, we'd keep the Marble Run because I know it's what I needed. I also have programs that run throughout the year. So I have a program called the Unstoppable Parent Program, which is for parents and carers who I just kind of need a little bit of help around learning how to say no and becoming a bit more gobshitey.
Oh, your first one that you did of that.
Gobshite training program.
Yeah,
It's a great program. I really love the Unstoppable Parent program. We have a
great
parent
program.
program called Neurocurious, which
Yeah,
is a 12-week program for parents and carers in neurodivergent households who are just starting to think, oh my God, I might be neurodivergent. So
yeah.
it's like a crash course in, so you think you might be neurodivergent, which I deliver with Kate Jones, who's a psychotherapist. And then we're the second year into my EHCP Success Accelerator program. So that's a 6-month intensive program for people who are either just thinking about getting an EHCP or who have an EHCP and are going to tribunal. And basically, it's everything I know about EHCPs and tribunals packed into a membership with trainings on every step of the process. You get a roadmap and we have some tools to help you with that. So that's kind of continuously improving. We've had 2 cohorts on that so far.
And what you know about EHCPs, Heidi, is huge. I'm just going to just put that in there because my son wanted to come up earlier and then he got too shy. I said, I want to come and say hi to Heidi. And I said to him, why is that? And he said, because I know Heidi was the one that helped you get the EOTAS package that we needed, Mum. And I said, yeah, she was.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I came into this, I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what EHCP stood for, Education, Health and Care Plan, for anyone that's interested.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about autism, neurodivergence, apart from what I knew like about my life.
Yeah.
I didn't know, oh, that's an autistic life. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I really struggled to find reliable information that was accessible for me as a neurodivergent person.
Yeah.
I'm a person that learns through this medium. So listening to people speak about things is how I learn.
Hmm.
But I also needed like really detailed instructions and templates for things.
Yeah.
So whilst I was going through the process, I was thinking, do you know, this doesn't exist. Or it does, but like you can get a lot of that stuff off the IPSY website. And I always point people to IPSY.
Mm.
It's a great resource. And it's free.
Mm.
But sometimes you just need a parent or another person to just unpick some of that detail and explain what that means
Mm.
and to give you like a little bit of a you can do this. Do you
Mm.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so
And
that's what
sometimes
I
you just
did.
got
I
those
started,
little questions, haven't you, that
right.
parent, and you just think, I'm in the moment, I'm doing something, and I've just got a question. And I know that's how I used your groups a lot, was I would pop in and just go, help. And
Yeah.
somebody in there had been through it, would
Yeah.
go, actually, well, I've tried this, and your community is a very helpful community, and they kind of all rally round and will support. And I know you pop in a lot as well. So there was a lot of support available, I felt when I was using it.
I mean, the amount of like time saving you can do
Yeah,
by being in a community with other parents who are maybe a few steps down the road ahead of you.
yeah.
9 times out of 10, if something doesn't feel right to you, it isn't.
Mm.
Right? If you be like, I'm sure that can't be right. When someone says, no, you can't have OT in an EHCP,
Yeah.
like that can't be right.
Yeah.
But you don't know why. And so
Yeah.
you go into the Marble Run group, which is our closed Facebook group just for Marble Run members, and you go, I've just been told this. That's not right, is it? And then people will be like, no, it's not right. And here's
Yeah.
why. Send code of practice, section 9 point whatever. It's always section 9 point something. 7 9, I'm guessing. But anyway, I don't think it is 9.79. I'm showing off now. But and then you go back with an email saying, I've checked, and the send code of practice section 9.79. It isn't 9.79. Don't
Yeah. Everyone's going to come back and write comments now. It's the
there.
wrong bit, Heidi.
There's this, and it saves you weeks of
Yeah, it
backwards and
does.
forwardsing,
Yeah.
and when you're going through this process, you need, like, I always say, like, when you're a child, you're a parent of a child with a neurodivergence or who has barriers to attendance or you're in the HCP process, it's like dog years, right? 1 year in regular parenting is 7 years in send parenting, right? Um, if you can save yourself a bit of time, my God, do it. If you can go on my membership and pull a template letter that says to school, quit marking these absences as unauthorized, and here's why.
Yeah.
Why should you spend hours trying to compose a letter when I can give you a template?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it was definitely really helpful for, me and my family when we were going through it. And when I didn't even know, considering the job that I was doing, I didn't even know what EOTAS was,
Yeah.
which I'm embarrassed to say.
Nor did I.
But until we kind of crashed into it ourselves and I knew he couldn't
Nor
go to
did I.
school.
The things that I know, like the things that are like the linchpin of the work that I do, I think I can confidently say every single one of those things is because a parent said to me, by the way, pss, 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 pss. Right? So the PRU that my son had some time in, which was a medical needs pupil referral unit specifically
Mhm.
for children and young people with mental health difficulties.
Mhm.
Didn't know it existed. Professionals in my school did and didn't tell me.
Mm.
A parent came up to me after a Q&A session and said, by the way, did you know about this PRU? And I was like, no.
No.
And she went, ask. And when my son got there, there were three other kids from his school year in that PRU, but no one told me. The EOTAS, someone said to me, have you thought about EOTAS? What's that? Education otherwise than at school. What, you mean home ed? No, it's not home
Yeah,
ed.
that's what I thought.
And I was like, no, where do I find out information about it? There isn't really anywhere to get information. That's what I do now.
Mm.
Right. But that was a parent.
Mm.
A parent said to me, in a garden when we were playing, my son was rolling around on the grass with their dogs. You can see dogs are a theme.
Mhm.
She said, how long have you known that Theo's autistic? And I said, Theo isn't autistic. And she went, are you sure? He was 14.
Yeah.
No one had ever said to me, I think Theo might be autistic.
Yeah.
So you cannot underestimate the value of those conversations with other parents. And we are so fortunate. Our community, our big community, is just parents, a lot of parents who know actually a lot more than I do about some things,
Mm.
you know, and like I see it all the time. I can leave that group to take care of itself pretty much
Mm.
most of the
Mm.
time because we've got some incredible parents in there who are like, I'm going to make sure people don't have to go through what I went through.
Yeah.
I've got stuff in my head. It was really awful experiencing this. I'm going to make sure that counts, and I'm going to put it in that Facebook group so that people have got it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to those
Yeah.
parents because that's parents like that is what got me through.
Yeah. It is that, isn't it? It's about finding that circle of people that get it and are your backup team. They've got your back.
And
That
that's what we
you
try to
know.
do with the marble run. Like we see kind of common themes of things coming through and we see questions coming through and like Theo does a bit of admin for me in the Facebook group and he'll be like, Mum, this question keeps coming up. And I'll be like, right, we'll do a webinar on it or we'll make a template for it.
Yeah.
So, we're able to kind of tap into what things are, and like at the minute, attendance stuff is massive,
Yeah.
more than it's ever been because there's new stuff coming
Yeah.
through,
Yeah.
guidance. So we're really thinking about, okay, what's our attendance training looking like? What have
Yeah.
we got? Where are the gaps?
Yeah.
Because we know that when you're right there and you're a parent, and it's all well and good me sitting here going, we got through, we've made it. But I know that there are parents who are in the thick of it right now, and we need to make sure that we're meeting those needs so that they can meet their child's needs, right?
Absolutely. Heidi, thank you. I could talk to you forever.
Well, you
We
know that I could,
keep
and I'm
going.
really
We can
sorry for
keep
blabbering
going.
on.
But yeah, you probably need to kind of switch things off for a bit and
I need to go and
but
get dressed and take my son back to university.
yeah. Do you want to take him back today though?
Nope. I was
No.
supposed to take him back yesterday, but it was snowing. So I got out of it yesterday, but I do
Yeah.
need to probably put a bra on. And
Well, I was just thinking if I put a coat on, no one will notice.
but I always have that thing of what if I'm in an accident and
Yeah,
I've not
true.
got a bra on?
I wouldn't care
What
though
needs to see
then.
that?
Oh, Heidi, thank you ever so much for joining me today. And I say I'll put all your contact details in the show notes so people can find you. It was a pleasure.
I'm so pleased you're doing this. Thank you for making this podcast. I've listened to some of them and they're just cracking. You're just
Oh, thanks,
doing a great
Heidi.
thing.
Thank you. Well, that's it for this episode of the Untypical OT Talks. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Whether you're walking the dog, folding laundry, or hiding in the toilet for 5 minutes apiece, and there's no judgment here, I'm glad you chose to spend your time with me today. If you're a parent or a carer of a child with additional needs and you're feeling overwhelmed, burnt out, or just like you need a bit of backup, I've got you. And I'm here to help you find a way through the trickier stuff, like behaviour and those moments when you feel like you might just run out of steam, so you can be the parent you want to be and take care of yourself too. Want to connect? You'll find me over on all the social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, where I share more tips, resources, and real talk. And hey, if this episode made you laugh, nod along, or feel a little less alone, why not buy me a coffee? Just click the link in the show notes. It's a small way to show your support and keep this podcast going. Take care of yourself today. You're doing an amazing job. Until next time, let's keep getting curious together.